Yeah. What we're finding is that rising inflation leads to rising interest rates. Rising interest rates has a significant impact on our industry. What we're seeing right now is that new apartment starts, so breaking ground, starting new projects, has fallen by about half.
This is the Money Seed Podcast, where we discuss all things investing, plain and simple, the way it should be. Please remember, this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be investment advice. Welcome back to the Money Seed Podcast. Today, my guest is Mike Kaeding from Norhart. Norhart is in Minnesota. They are a huge builder of apartments, and they are building what are known as smart apartments, and they are rapidly growing to become one of the largest apartment builders in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit more about Norhart. How old is it? How long you guys have been at it? And what is your current project that you're working on?
Yeah, we've been around for 30 or 40 years now. But at a high level, what we're really trying to do is to drive down the cost of construction and the cost of housing. So we've been actually dropping that by 20 to 30%. We believe we can achieve a 50% reduction in cost. Imagine what that means someday by allowing our residents, allowing you to have half of the rent or half of the mortgage payment. And so our current projects right now, our newest one is Norhart Oakdale. This is a 350 unit project, one of the nicest in Twin Cities here. It has a beautiful rooftop pool, patio, grill. It has penthouse suites, a restaurant, coffee shop, co-working space. It has thousands of square feet of amenity space, including a state-of-the-art fitness center and spa.
Mike, when you say that you are reducing the cost of construction, I right away, my ears perk up because construction is typically an industry where it has historically been very challenging to reduce costs, right? And a lot of different companies, a lot of different people have been working on this problem of how do I make quality, affordable housing? And I mean, in construction, you have concrete, it's a commodity. You have steel, it's a commodity. The various materials that you use on the interior, I'm guessing you're pretty much getting at the similar cost as other large firms who are in this market. What is your secret sauce, if you can give us a little bit? I mean, what allows you to achieve these kind of savings?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you see the big exciting things on the news, like 3D printing of houses or full volumetric offsite construction or robotics. Those splashy things don't solve housing affordability. They're solutions to particular problems. What actually solves it is 10,000 little problems, all fixed and working in sync. To give you some sense or some flavor of this, one of the problems that we first solved was bringing all the work in one place. Typically in construction, your owner is different than your developer, who's different than your general contractor coordinating the construction, who's different than all of your subcontractors. We brought all that under one roof. And if you think about it, if construction were to produce cars, have a different company installing the wheel, a different company installing the windshield, and a different company installing the door. And of course, the door company would be upset, or would be delayed for some reason, couldn't come out for 2 weeks. Your line would be shut down. And when they did come out, they'd be irate because they could only work on one car at a time instead of a whole fleet of cars. And so manufacturing looks at that and says, this is crazy. We would never do that. In construction, that's normal. And really at the heart of it is we're learning the lessons that these other industries have learned, who've also improved substantially in the past 60 years, and applying it into our industry. And there's a lot of little techniques that we do to make that happen.
I think that's very interesting that you said it's a lot of little problems.
Yeah.
And, I'm a corporate individual and I've worked in various different industries over the last 20 years or so. And I can tell you every company always wants to cut costs and everyone is looking for that one magic project or that one change that's going to save a bunch of money. But the reality is it's usually not one big magic thing that's going to save a bunch of money. It's a lot of little things. Can you give us some examples of what are some of these little things and what would I notice? Like if I walk into one of your apartment buildings, what are some of the things I would notice that are different from typical apartment buildings?
The end user wouldn't notice much at all because the end product is, in fact, it's some of the nicest properties in the Twin Cities. We just had a U.S. congressman literally just about an hour ago come visit one of our facilities, and we walked him through. And one of the little things that they were showing off is that we produce all of our own steel studs. And so there's these giant coils of steel that come in at one end, and we work with the auto industry to get those steel. And we design it in such a way that maximizes how we use that steel. And then they produce all the studs and bring it into wall panels. But just the fact we produce our own stud cuts the cost of those studs by like 60%. And then the fact that we have an engineering team all in house that do like dissertations on our studs and our joists to maximize the strength and minimize the amount of material that goes into it, adds additional savings on top of that. So that's one little thing, but there's literally tens of thousands of things like that.
Amazing. So tell me, I guess, how big is Norhart right now? How many employees do you have?
We're about 250 employees.
Sorry, how many different projects are you working on at the moment?
We only ever do one project at a time. And that's intentional because then we can squish down the timeline and complete the buildings faster and lower costs. But in the hopper, we've got about a half dozen or so properties, from ones that are just brand new, talking about purchasing the land, to ones that are actually currently under construction.
And Mike, do you also look at things like LEED certifications or energy efficiency? Are those also considered when designing your buildings?
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't actually officially get LEED certification for the simple reason that it's expensive to get the certification, but you can still do all the things on that list, right? So we do a lot of those things, between the energy efficiency of the building itself, to the windows that you use, to the energy efficiency of the furnaces, to the fact that we're doing solar on the roofs. So we execute on a lot of that, but we just don't get the credential because it costs more money, and that doesn't add a lot of value to people.
And Mike, why Minnesota?
That's where I grew up. It's where we started. My parents started the business, and yeah, we started here. We've been expanding beyond it.
And what is your goal? I know that you have on your website, you have a vision of being, I think the vision currently is the largest builder of apartments in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. But it seems like you're probably already very close to that goal if you are building 200-300 unit developments. Where do you see your company going in the next, say, 10, 20 years?
Our dream in 20 years is to actually meaningfully solve housing affordability. And I think in the next 10 years, we actually have a shot at doing that, which I can explain how. But to give you some sense of the scale at that point, we're looking at producing about 60,000 units per year and having 192,000 units under management by that point.
Okay, say those numbers again. How many under management?
192,000 under management and 60,000 units being produced per year.
That's incredible. I mean, that's even just the material and the people and the coordination that's required to have that kind of scale. So typically,
but that's the scale it takes.
That's a scale it takes. Yeah, absolutely. So talk a little bit more about that. This idea of, I mean, everyone is talking about affordable housing. I think America structurally has a housing shortage, and yet it's just a difficult market, right? I mean, yes, there's a housing shortage, but at the same time, it's difficult to afford a house, right?
Yeah.
So walk us a little bit through that. Like, how does Norhart fit in?
Yeah, ultimately, it's a supply and demand imbalance. There's more demand than supply being produced. And the supply that is being produced is produced at a high cost point, right? And so, like, if we were okay with that in manufacturing, our cell phones today would be giant $10,000 bricks. But the fact that people keep innovating in that space have driven it down to this $1,000 supercomputer in your hand, which is amazing, right? That hasn't happened in housing. In fact, it's gone backwards. And housing affordability has only gotten worse. So how do we actually solve that? Well, we're focused on driving down the cost of construction. And so we believe we can reach a 50% reduction in cost. Then once that happens, people often ask, are you then pricing your apartments at a lower price point? The answer is no, but why? If we lowered our rents today, which we could, several thousand people benefit from that and have affordable housing. But that doesn't solve it nationwide. Instead, we're taking those profits and pushing it into producing the system that builds apartments. Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to produce a car, but it is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to produce the system that produces cars. And that's what we're working on. And over the next 10 years, we think we can scale that up to the point where we're producing so many units. It affects that supply-demand balance to start lowering prices, not just for our own residents, but for people nationwide. And that's how we solve housing affordability in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it, right? If you and other builders can all of a sudden bring a lot of units online over the next 10, 20 years, then that will tip the balance toward the favor in favor of the renters and the buyers.
Exactly.
And Mike, are you working on other technologies right now that would further make the construction easier and lower cost and more repeatable? Because it sounds like a lot of these technologies require scale, right? For example, if you're building a development with 1,000 units, I'm going to guess the per unit cost is going to be lower than if you're doing a development for like 200 units.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. At different levels of scales, there's different techniques they can use. So as a small builder, you can actually achieve quite significant reduction in cost despite that scale. And some of those techniques as a small builder don't work very well as a large builder, right? But honestly, when you look at our industry, the smartest people in the world go into places like technology, AI, robotics, maybe finance. They don't think to go into construction. So construction is sort of I don't want to be negative, but sort of a backwards world. It's a world that's far behind where everyone else is at. So a lot of the innovation isn't even in technology. It's just in simple techniques. It's the way we do things. It's like applying the assembly line into construction is one little thing. The more advanced stuff that we are working, because we are working on cool technology as well, is producing full 3D models of the entire building that then generate every single part and component throughout the whole building, down to like the screw and where it goes, and then flushing that through our whole supply chain all the way down to our suppliers who are giving us the core raw materials into our pipeline. And so building that whole infrastructure out literally doesn't exist. I talked to the top software vendors for our industry, and they do not have anything for this kind of thing because people like me are not requesting it. But now we are, and we're starting to invent what that looks like.
Which again surprises me because AutoCAD as a tool has been around since the 1980s, right?
Yes.
That's surprising to hear.
Yeah, you have AutoCAD and then the more advanced version, which is Revit, which is full 3D. And then they have like subtools like assembly and things like that. But I ended up talking to one of the board of directors of Autodesk. And he said very honestly to me, like, our company, we support software for a variety of industries. For example, one industry is Pixar. Pixar is pushing on us for the newest, most crazy technology. Guess how many people I hear out of construction asking for even basic stuff? Zero, right? No one's asking for what you're asking for, Mike, and that's why we haven't produced it.
Yep, absolutely. So, Mike, in terms of some of the technologies that are always on the news with respect to building, I know that if you do an internet search for like 3D printed housing, you'll get 1,000 hits, right? And there's companies, I think it's called Boxable, right, who are building houses in a factory, and then it just kind of pops up like a tent when it gets to the site. What is your opinion on those technologies, and are they influencing your manufacturing methods at all?
Absolutely. I think they're fantastic. And we look at a lot of that stuff and we use the stuff that makes sense. You have to remember, we're focused on driving down the cost of housing, not creating a newsflash, right? And so things like 3D printing is very flashy and it can be used really well in specific situations, but it's not a silver bullet, right? It doesn't solve the whole industry. It's one part of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. And so I think that's what's missing, is that it's 10,000 little problems. You need to bring all those together in order to solve the issues.
Got it. So, Mike, what is your current outlook on the housing market, the mortgage market over the next maybe 6 months or a year? I know right now the economy is not looking too hot. We have struggles in the banking sector, et cetera. What's your current outlook?
Yeah. What we're finding is that rising inflation leads to rising interest rates. Rising interest rates has a significant impact on our industry. What we're seeing right now is that new apartment starts, so breaking ground, starting new projects, has fallen by about half. But if you look at the number of deliveries, which is the finished product, that's as high as it's ever been. So we're seeing this big drop off that's happening, but at the same time, like, we're producing all these new units in this tough market. We're going to see probably a little bit of a depression of pricing for a little bit, but in a year or two, because that backlog is disappearing now, that means we're not going to be producing the apartments and the units that we need. And we're going to see probably a whiplash effect over the next couple of years. So it's going to be a rough market as we go forward.
Yeah, if you look back over the last 15, 20 years, you do see that where it's an industry that takes a long time to adjust, right?
Yep.
From the time you put, shovel in the ground to the time you finish a project can take quite a while, and the economy can shift during that time. And so it's an industry that tends to respond quite slowly to the economic winds, as it were.
Exactly, because once a project started, you're in it you can't stop, right? And it takes so long to do the project and get the project approval. It's a couple of year response time.
And Mike, what is your business model in terms of funding future projects? When you finish a building, do you then hold on to it and rent it for cash flow, or do you sell it to another company who will then rent it out so that way you get all your cash back? Do you refinance it? What is your typical way of financing projects?
Yeah, so traditionally, we're producing units at a fairly inexpensive price. So if it's a $100 million valuation project, the bank would typically fund $75 million. Our cost might be 70 or 65. So we actually generate cash on each building that we do, which is very different in this industry. So we haven't needed to sell buildings, we buy and hold. But given the interest rate environment, those same banks that were at 75 are now down at 55. And so now we got to bring in cash. And so at times we may sell buildings. We're launching a new Norhart Invest platform that gives people an opportunity to invest. It's the first time we've opened that up ever to our company. But yeah, that's how we're raising our capital.
Tell us a little bit more about that. I saw that on your website. It sounds like it's a waiting list at this point. You're just taking interested parties. But tell us a little bit more about how that works. Are people buying, or are they investing in a particular project or in the company as a whole? And what kind of returns are you targeting?
Yeah, so it feels a lot like a savings account. Not actually a bank. Our aim was to replace the bank here. It will let you get not only the return you would get from the bank, but also the bank's profits, right? And so you put money in, and you can take money out when you want, or you can put money in and lock it up for a certain period of time and get a higher rate of return. Now, these interest rates will fluctuate depending upon the Fed and current demand on our product. But if you just visit our website, the interest rates are up there on the website, completely there for you to look at. And yeah, what it is a fund, basically, in the behind the scenes. It's a fund where you put your money into, and then those dollars are actually put into our own projects. But that fund is set up in such a way that all the investors are protected from, and we have an equity share that's on top of the investors. So I and the company have to lose our money first before the investors would ever have a shot at losing theirs.
Very nice. So this isn't going to be like what we just had here in Silicon Valley, the SVB Bank, right? Where the owners got massive bonuses before the company went under. So
Exactly. Yeah, we actually think a lot about bank runs, and I've studied it quite a bit. And so we're actually putting together a whole presentation, because we're not far off from launching, that go into those details and what we're doing to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mike. So what's next in terms of geography? Right now you're in Minnesota. What is going to be the next city or next state where you're going to be expanding to?
Yeah, for our apartments, we're expanding into Texas right now. For manufacturing capacity, we have facilities in Wisconsin, and we're looking at expanding into Mexico. So those are our next stages.
Very cool. And when you develop these apartment buildings, do you have a target rent or target market in mind? Like, are you going after young professionals or elderly or young families?
It's mostly like a young professional kind of focus, but we often say that we're really just focused on creating the best home housing experience possible. And that tends to attract young professionals. Families tend to be more focused on homes. And then older people tend to come back to more of a rental environment. But we don't really pick any particular niche, in part because of fair housing. I have to be a little bit careful not to target any particular niche.
Interesting. Got it. All right, Mike. Thanks very much for your time today. I think it's great what you guys are doing. Any company that is helping drive costs down in the home manufacturing space, home construction space, I think is absolutely fantastic. Bringing lower rents and more affordable housing to America is something that is desperately needed. And I thank you for all your hard work. For more information, check out the website, norhart.com. There's all kinds of information on there about Mike, his team, upcoming projects, and as well as the opportunity to invest with Norhart. Mike, any final thoughts?
No, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun sharing a little bit about what we're doing.
I appreciate your time. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.